I was on my way to court. It was a very contentious court case, but that was fine. And I got off the tube. I was feeling really hot and I thought, what's going on? As I was on the escalator, I felt like I'd forgotten how to breathe. I could feel sweat starting to drip and I could see to my left a bus stop. And I literally just got myself over there in my slick suit, my heels, my pencil skirt. And I had to hold on to the bus stop, the actual bus stop, for dear life.
Welcome to The Slowdown, your time to define success and growth on your own terms with a little inspiration from others. I got to have a broad-ranging conversation here at Brazen Studios with Tamu Thomas, the author of Why Women Work So Much. I mean, just the title of that book triggers me. A few months ago, I went to a talk Tamu and Stephanie Sword-Williams hosted called Exhausted Women, and I was quite literally an exhausted woman that day. It was also International Women's Day, so there was something darkly ironic about what female independence actually looks like right now, which is why I think this conversation about how we can redefine ambition, rest, and self-worth beyond toxic productivity is so important right now. I cannot wait for you to listen to this episode. Hi, Tamu. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Tiana. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. You are the author of Why Women Work So Much, a passionate advocate for joyful living, boundaries, and sustainable success. You challenge the burnout culture and toxic productivity that so many women find themselves trapped in and explore how we can redefine ambition, rest, and self-worth beyond productivity. As a qualified social worker and somatic coach, you challenge the pervasive culture of burnout and advocate for a more balanced approach to ambition and self-care. I feel it's important to provide context to who you are, what you do, and your journey. And I'm very curious about the points in our childhoods that we learn what success is and when we internalize those definitions. So where were you raised, by who, and what were some of the early examples of success that you wanted to emulate?
Well, I was raised pretty much around West London. So started off my formative years in Ladbroke Grove, West London, very culturally rich and diverse area. And where I lived, it was highly populated with people from an immigrant background. So I was around a lot of people who, to a lesser or greater degree, ended up in the UK for whatever reason and saw being in the UK as an opportunity to create a better life for themselves, for their children, and also to be able to support people in their country of origin. So working hard was very much a staple part of the culture I lived within. And quite often people were from a low socioeconomic background. So to make ends meet, it wasn't uncommon to be around people who had multiple jobs to be able to meet the needs of their families. My parents are from Sierra Leone, which is in West Africa. My mum came here when she was 13, my dad in his early 20s. And they were from a culture where working hard was your pathway to freedom. And what I grew up seeing was lots of people working very, very hard. It wasn't uncommon for me to experience particularly men who were very qualified, degrees, sometimes PhDs, limited to doing things like driving taxi cabs, mini cabs, because there weren't many work opportunities. So I saw women in particular often working, studying, raising children, being the main breadwinner in the household, but still behaving like the little wife because they didn't want to intimidate their men or emasculate their men. And I saw that that helped people move out of social housing into houses that were mortgaged with driveways, better cars, holidays, different opportunities. So I saw a lot of success born of grueling hard work. But then I also had what I refer to like a chink in the system. One of my aunties, she lived in Sierra Leone. She had no desire to leave Sierra Leone. She loved it. She speaks 7 languages and she worked for the United Nations. And people would describe her as an international businesswoman. And when she would come to the UK, sometimes she stayed with us in our social housing, and sometimes mostly she stayed in this beautiful apartment in Baker Street. Our house was like different shades of brown and orange and yellow, like big time 70s hangover. Where she was cream carpets, lots of gold, chandeliers, things that sparkled. And she looked so jolly and joyful. I didn't know the words at the time, but she was radiant. She had a big belly, like deep belly laughter about her. And she looked like she really owned herself. And I didn't know, I was about 6 at the time. I didn't know what an international businesswoman was, but in comparison to the women I was around all the time, she just looked like something out of this world. And I decided I wanted to be an international businesswoman like her because I wanted to live a life that made me look radiant. So she also worked really hard, but her work seemed to me to be on her terms. She got to travel all over the world and have these great experiences. At that time, she didn't have a husband. She didn't have children. She was, for me, free as a bird. So I grew up with one arm, you have to work really, really hard. And then with the additional layer of racial discrimination as a black person, I had to work twice as hard. And then I had this woman who just smelled of Rive Gauche perfume and Jerry Curl hairspray. And so I saw that there was another way. And I didn't realize that was possible for me until I experienced my own burnout. And then my memories of my auntie Aminata came back. And I was like, that's what burnout is asking me to do.
And so then you went into the world of work, and what did you choose or decide to do?
I'm a polymath, maybe. I'm interested in lots of different things, and I've got a warm personality. So people project what they see me as onto me. So my aunts work in film and television. When I went to college and university, I was studying media and communications. I was doing work experience in media because that's what I wanted to do. I worked for a record company, then I worked for a film promotions company, but it didn't mean anything. It just felt vacuous, and I wanted to do something that was more meaningful. And I used to volunteer in my local community, and I was working with young people who were disadvantaged, but so bright and brilliant and full of potential. I thought, well, I can help you fine-tune your skills so that you can get better jobs, better qualifications and whatever else. And then my mum was a foster carer, and I remember sometimes overhearing meetings, and I just thought I could do a better job than that. And then literally the following week, I opened the local newspaper and there was a half-page ad for trainee social workers. You would get paid to get qualified as a social worker. And I applied for the job. I got the job, and that was that. I don't think that was my destiny. I think it was part of my journey to what I'm doing now. But I was a hard worker. I wasn't necessarily a structured worker. I later on in my life found out I've got ADHD. So my admin skills were absolutely shocking. But actually being out there doing the work, making change, I was brilliant at that. And when I experienced burnout, I thought I want to do something now that I'm passionate about. I want to do something that enables me to live well, because I realized I was living to work rather than working to support how I live. And I didn't want to waste the skills I had acquired as a social worker because they were really helpful. And I saw so many women around me, whether it was in my personal life or via the screen on TV or social media, literally just working for the sake of working and being exhausted and trying to do more work to combat their exhaustion. And I thought, I can help with that. And that's when I remembered about being an international businesswoman and thought, actually, I can start a business doing that. And maybe it will take me around the world so I can have the international element. And I really wanted to be able to be present when my daughter started secondary school. I wanted to be at home when she came home from school so that we could have conversations about what was going on for her. I remembered how many of my friends were kind of half parented by what they were experiencing in the wider world because their parents were working so hard. And I didn't want that experience for my child. I thought at the stage where your emotional needs are higher and more complex, I want you to come to me and speak to me about stuff instead of speaking to friends who don't have the knowledge they need to provide you with decent guidance.
And you mentioned there that your parents were foster parents.
My mother was, yeah.
Because I have a couple of friends whose parents also did that, and it looked like a variety of kids coming and living with them over a longer period of time. Yeah. What was that like for you?
Do you know what? It was so normal because my mum, wherever she is, she ends up being like the community auntie. And my house was a safe place for so many people. So I would always have friends staying because they couldn't stay at home for whatever reason, cousins coming. So it was very normal. Our mum was our mum, but she was also a mother for so many people. That's just her nature. It's her way. So it didn't feel complicated for me at all. We've still got relationships with some of the children she fostered. Some of the children's children consider my mum an additional grandmother. So it was challenging. Don't get me wrong. It was very challenging at times, but it was also hugely rewarding.
Yeah, it was interesting because my friend, she's Ethiopian. I don't know if that's a cultural thing, but they were two daughters, and every few years they would have another boy come and live with them for a few years, and so on. And so they have this collection of brothers that still very much consider her parents as their parents.
Yeah.
And it kind of created this kind of lovely additional sibling layer.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, so Sierra Leone, you will go to somebody's house and they've got extended family members living there, or maybe there's somebody who wasn't coping very well, or they couldn't afford to look after their children, so somebody else takes them in. So it could be a cultural thing, because it's not uncommon in African cultures to be caring for, because it takes a village, right? We don't tend to live the very nuclear way we do in the Western world.
I think that's an important kind of premise for this conversation, which is that we've gone into this like hyper independent burnout culture of I have to make it in the world, and if I haven't made it, I have failed, and it's all on me. And we've moved so far away, like it's so unusual to hear of people who foster multiple people into their homes, whereas that should be actually the far more common thing, that we take in somebody. I'm Serbian, and that's very much the culture too. You know, we grew up with so little that it would be very commonplace for parents to be sleeping in the roll-out couch in the living room while the two kids shared the one other bedroom in the one-bed flat, you know? And I think living in those like close quarters also makes it hard to like hide things from your family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's how we're designed, right? We're the most pro-social creatures on this planet. I was speaking at an event last week, and I was talking about connection actually being a biological need. And the following day on LinkedIn, quite a few of the posts were starting with connection is a biological need. Because of our culture and the way we are socialized to be productive, to be workers, we have forgotten the essence of what it is to be a human being. We biologically need each other. We cannot survive. We have so much more conveniences that support us as human beings, but loneliness is now a health issue because of the impact of not having the connection we need. So not any old connection, because we can have co-regulatory experiences that enhance our life, but we can also have co-dysregulatory experiences that do not, that actually take away. So it's about being in community with people that assist you to thrive.
You were working as a social worker. You've mentioned burnout several times. What was the actual culmination of things, the moment where you realized something has to give?
Yeah, so as a social worker, I was working with people that had really significant challenges. A lot of them were intergenerational, so there were things that were happening generations upon generations. Quite often, people came from low socioeconomic backgrounds. So when I was working with parents mostly, and sometimes children that were experiencing anxiety, what that looked like for me was so different to my experience. I didn't even consider I was experiencing anxiety. So it crept over time. It began in 2009. I remember feeling like I just don't have energy. I literally feel like I'm dragging myself around through the day. I remember playing with my child felt like a chore, and I didn't want that to be the experience. I know that our energy and how we behave is picked up by our children, regardless of what we're saying and the plastic smiles we're putting on our faces. I didn't want my child to experience me as dragging myself to be able to engage with her. And I wanted her to experience me as joyful, as vibrant. I didn't want to be a reflection of what I saw in my childhood, which was women who were exhausted all the time. I was experiencing like recurring sinusitis, laryngitis, bronchitis, brain fog. And at that time, I was in my, I don't think I was 35 yet. So I was still, relatively young. I thought this just isn't normal. And then I started to recognize that my mood would fluctuate a lot. My vitality, my zest for life was starting to reduce. So I just thought it must be what I'm eating and that I'm not active enough. So in 2009, my daughter was 2. She'd just transitioned to nursery. I just got my first promotion. So there were more demands on my life than there were previously. And I thought, well, I'm just not working hard enough. Clearly, I'm not eating well. So I went to see a nutritionist. Thought I'd sort out my food. And then she started trying to talk about my emotions. And I was like, listen, I didn't sign up for this.
I paid you for the diet stuff.
I paid you for quinoa, for kale and mung beans, not digging around in my history. So I stopped going. I just took the information and I started reading stuff about productivity, different personal development books, gratitude practice, all of this stuff, because I thought, well, it must be my mindset. So I've got to work on my mindset. And it worked. It helped. These feelings, the feeling of Malay and everything else I was feeling, it disappeared. I don't know where it went to. I didn't know at that time, but I was able to function. It was being rewarded. I was able to do more stuff. I was able to volunteer myself to do more work. And every time I had a additional symptom or a symptom got worse, I just decided it's because I wasn't working hard enough. I wasn't being ambitious enough. I wasn't being organized enough. I wasn't managing my time enough. So I developed lots of different strategies to suppress my experience. And that's the double-edged sword of being resilient, right? You're resilient so you can bounce back from adversity, but you're so busy bouncing back, you don't realize, well, if I'm constantly having to bounce back from adversity, this isn't a flex, something is going on. And then the work I was doing was really demanding, to a lesser or greater degree, playing God with people's lives, making recommendations to court about who should live with whom and if they're able to live with each other. My child was going from nursery to school and there were all of these different changes happening. And there was no part of me that could believe that I needed to change something about my circumstances. Our individual culture teaches us if you're not getting the results you want, it's your fault. You're ineffective. You're doing something incorrectly. So you need to try harder. And I was one of the people, now knowing that I've got ADHD, that had school reports. Tamu must try harder. Tamu's got so much potential. So those things were in my mind. And one of my biggest fears still in life is to be a failure. Ask me what a failure is. I couldn't actually tell you, but I don't want to be a failure. I want to live a big, bold, wonderful, meaningful life. So it really drives me. And sometimes I don't know the cutoff point, which is why I wrote a book called Women Who Work Too Much, because working too much was my solace. It was my savior. It was my safe place. And it meant that I can operate in a way where I couldn't feel the signals from my body asking me to slow down. So it got to 2016, I think it was. I was on my way to court. By that time, I'd set up my own social work business. It was a very contentious court case, but that was fine. I was a boss at that stuff. I knew I had done my stuff. I wasn't worried about giving evidence at all. And I got off the tube. I was feeling really hot. And I thought, what's going on? I feel really strange. As I was on the escalator, TfL is not the cleanest. I don't normally hold on to the railing of the escalator. I had to hold on because it felt like my knees were giving way. As I got up, it felt like to the top of the escalator, I felt like I'd forgotten how to breathe. I was gasping for breath. I could feel sweat starting to drip. And I felt like I was going to collapse. And I could see to my left a bus stop. And I literally just got myself over there in my slick suit, my heels, my pencil skirt, my designer bag, and I had to hold on to the bus stop, the actual bus stop, for dear life. And people looking at me like, what on earth is going on? It looked like I'd taken some kind of drugs. I was on a bad trip. I was suited and booted, looking like I was high on drugs. And I was contemplating calling an ambulance because I could even hear my heart beating in my ears. And of course, the resilience kicked in. Don't be so ridiculous. You're not about to die. It's fine. I used my tools. What can you see, hear, taste, touch, all of that kind of stuff. Managed to get myself together, got to court, fixed up myself in the bathroom, gave evidence like a boss. And then on my way home, I contacted the GP because I thought something is very, very wrong. Went to see the GP, was referred for psychotherapeutic services, and was told that it sounded like I had been experiencing exhaustion. I had left it. That morphed into low mood. I left it. That morphed into depression. I didn't leave it. I suppressed it. Then my body had to up the ante and it became anxiety. And that panic attack, I'd had other versions of that, milder versions, and I kept referring to them as like heightened periods of anxiety. And the psychologist said, well, actually, what you're referring to as heightened periods of anxiety were anxiety attacks. And what you had outside court was a panic attack because your body had enough. So literally, my body had to shut me down in order for me to slow down and reassess my life.
Wow, it's so interesting how our bodies try to do that and ultimately safeguard us in that way.
Yeah.
And it happens to people who are hyper productive and put this stuff away. Like, and then what happened next after you kind of got that clear message from your body?
So what happened after the panic attack, when they were trying to tell me about taking anti-anxiety medication and antidepressants, I know myself, even though I was numbing my feelings and not paying attention to what was going on. And because of my experience as a social worker and working within mental health teams, I knew that it wasn't mental health per se. It didn't just feel spiritual. It felt very, very primal. Like it literally felt like my body is saying, I want you back. All these places you've scattered yourself around, I want you back. I recognized that going from being employed to starting my own social work business was not the answer. I knew that I needed to totally update my system. My operating system was well out of date and it wasn't working for me. It was actually doing things to me. And I thought, okay, I've got the opportunity here to do something that changes the trajectory of my life, my daughter's life, and role models to her and other people, if they're interested, that there's another way. I recognized how much of my life was devoted to work. There was a time when my mum invited me round. She wanted to have a chat because my daughter was round there and said that when she wakes up to go to the toilet, I used to have acrylic nails. She could hear me typing in the middle of the night, and then I shout at her for anything. That was her truth. That was her experience. I don't think I was like that bad, but in her eyes, the things that would normally be a normal thing, I was very irritable about. And I thought, well, if there are loads of women having this experience, it's not an individual thing, it's actually cultural, it's systemic. There's something that needs to change. And whilst we can't necessarily march into Downing Street and say we need work reform right now, otherwise we're not going back to work because we need to earn money, we need to do things. I thought I've got tools that I can utilise to support women to approach their relationship with work differently. So yeah, that's what I did. I had to work far too much to get it off the ground. I'm a parent. I'm a human being. I've got needs and responsibilities. So I continued with my social work practice whilst I built this business. So there were about 18 months where I was doing both. But I knew that I was working too much, that I was being hyperproductive for a finite period of time. And I knew it was for a reason. It's not like before where that was just my way of life. I knew it was going to lead me somewhere. And lots of people, like you'll see online, people talking about a business that has lots of ease and flow. Actually, effort precipitates that ease we want, and we need to build systems and structures that allow us to genuinely flow. Otherwise, what we think is flow is actually drift. And, you know, we've got a sympathetic branch of our nervous system for a reason. It helps us get up and go. And sometimes we do need to use that fight or flight energy to be able to birth this new thing and then have the systems and structures that allow us to work in ways that are regenerative. So I hired a coach, my first ever coach, who's now my friend, Nicola Ray, A Life More Inspired. And that was the first time I'd heard of concepts like limiting beliefs and self-abandonment. And I was like, oh, I'm giving myself away in the hope that people will recognize the value I offer and then consider me as worthy, when actually that stuff is great. As human beings, we do need that stuff. But when you rely on that stuff, that is when productivity becomes like constantly eating Haribo instead of having a satiating meal.
We talked about this earlier around effort precipitates ease. I think there's this sort of mal-informed idea that this concept and even this podcast is about like, just slow down all the time. Like, just be chill, just do nothing, just do the bare minimum. And I think that's not possible. If you've come up with an idea, if you want to start a business, if you want to change your career, if you want to retrain, this comes with a period of hustle, striving, working hard, putting in the effort, in the knowledge that on the horizon, hopefully on a timeline that makes sense for you, that period of ease is coming.
Yeah.
I also think we compound with that the price of living in London.
Hello.
The fact of, you know, I'm in my 30s and in order to, I work for myself, right? No one else is paying into my pension but me. No one else is paying into investment funds but me. No one's putting away savings but me. So I don't just want to at the end of the month have made enough money to get by, right? I want to have made enough money to put that away for the future, to start planning for a family, all of those things.
Yeah.
And so realistically, this is the time in my life where I do need to work more. But it's about finding that balance. And to your point, it's about figuring out and kind of redefining for yourself, like, is this success that I'm striving for because it's something I want, or it's because of something other people want? Is this something I'm doing because I hope other people will like me, or other people will think I'm worthy? Or is it because like I genuinely have this ambition and want to do this?
Yeah.
How do you help people separate those things?
Well, it's literally, what does success mean to you?
Is that where you start?
That's where we start. Well, first of all, we start with, what is success? Because our ideas of success usually come from externals. And what I find is, with most of the women I've worked with, speak to, or whatever, they haven't really had an opportunity to consider what success is to them and what success means at this stage of my life. So if I'm working with somebody, like you've talked about, raising a family, starting a family, my idea of success with an 18-year-old is very different to your idea of success contemplating a newborn baby. So it's about, what season of life am I in and what does that mean? I was speaking at an event and there was somebody in their 20s that was talking about boundaries at work and overworking. And I was like, this might be a surprise to you, but I think that in your 20s, you are supposed to be overworking. You are supposed to be doing that striving. You are supposed to be volunteering yourself for all of these experiences so that you can get to know yourself and what you like, what your strengths are, what your passions and interests are. And then as we progress through our careers and progress through life, it's about refining, focusing on the things that really light you up. And I don't mean the things you find easy, the things that light you up so much that even when it's really challenging, you're like, you know what, this is worth it. I'm going to give it my all. I am going to hustle for a little bit. I am going to grind so I can get over this hurdle, because when I look at the overall picture, it's worth it. So it's about getting clear. What is that about? For me, as somebody who has overworked and overfunctioned for the vast majority of their life, my number one goal, what I am ambitious for at this stage in my life, is to be a well-rested woman. And in order to be a well-rested woman, I had to do some calculations, because for me, if success is taking away from me being able to live a good quality of life, that's not success. That's commodifying myself. So to your point about the finances, the savings, the investments, the pension, the looking after yourself, I had to sit down and think about everything that gets in the way of me being able to rest. And I wrote it down. Those are all the things I need to remove or mitigate or contain in some way so that I can live a restful life. Let me tell you something. It is very difficult to live a restful life when you're not making the kind of money you need to make. And I don't just mean, as you were talking about, to pay your bills. I sat down and thought to myself, how much do I want to save each month? How much do I want to put into my pension? What do I want to put into investments? What about the savings for my daughter? My daughter does some work for me. And when you read all of this financial literature, I was like, okay, cool. Her pension starts now. So I've got to make those pension contributions. Where do I want to live? What is the kind of life where I wake up in the morning and I feel like I'm gliding? I went onto Rightmove, I went onto utilities websites to get as much information as I could about how much that would cost me. Cool, okay, in order to be able to live that life, it might have changed now because the last time I did the calculations was in 2022. But in 2022, I worked out that I need to pay myself a salary of £127,000. That's paying myself that salary in order to be able to fund that life. Initially requires super hard work to set up the systems and structures that are going to enable you to do that. And then it's a bit like climbing up a mountain. When you're climbing up a mountain, you're using so much energy to get up there. When you get to the top, you're not using your energy in the same way because that's just not sustainable. But when you're patterned to work really hard, it's even harder slowing down, focusing on high value work that is actually going to support progress because you've been programmed for doing and for busyness. So that in itself is not just a mindset shift. your nervous system is used to operating in survival. So now you've got to repattern yourself to work in a state that enables you to thrive. So it means saying no far more than saying yes, when you've been brought up to think that as a girl, as somebody who's productive, as somebody who adds value to wherever they're working.
If something needs doing, I'll do it.
Exactly. Roll up your sleeves, get it done. I'm a hard worker. Hard work gets you to a place, but then you need to be strategic. You need to be doing like the leverageable work. And for somebody whose default is doing, that is just as hard. Like doing that, making that switch is just as hard as working really hard.
It's interesting because it's like I had the same process, which is, as someone that kind of grew up freelance, self-employed, I started modeling when I was 15. So I was kind of like off my parents' payroll when I was 16. And that is an industry where you're constantly in scarcity mindset, you're constantly in competition mindset. It's not the kind of work where you're like, okay, I'll get really good at this and then I can up my fee, or I can have somebody else do it for me. Or it's literally you have to show up and physically do the work, and manual labor in many ways. Because of the way that the pay is given, it's 6 months after you've done a job, you might be paid something, and then like 9 months after you've done a show, you might be paid something, and then you're doing a whole bunch of test shoots that are free. And so you're kind of receiving this money in dribs and drabs. There's no clear, this is your salary, this is how much you make a year. You might be getting paid this year for something you did 6 months ago. I mean, it's like really hard to, and you're not taught financial literacy at all. And so I was just sort of receiving these small bits of money and not really knowing which job it correlated to. So I started to keep like a spreadsheet and actually like chase my jobs and stuff. But what that then meant was, when I started the creative agency with my business partner, who was also a model, I was, 24 when we started it. We sort of took the agency in that same model, which was, let's get a project and then get another project, and this scarcity mindset of, oh, there's not much going on right now, we should be doing something. And then if 4 projects would come in, we'd take them all, because why would you not? You don't know how long you're going to have to spend without any work coming in. So you would kind of, and that's when I had that period of burnout, because it was like the most amount of projects, the most amount of responsibility ever. Her and I were doing everything. There wasn't anybody else. We obviously hire freelance teams to come in and work with us, but I manage those teams, and it's my personality type to go, it's going to take me longer to explain this to you than to do it myself, so I'll do it myself. If I can do it in 5 minutes, I'll do it right now. Or if you need something doing, just do it yourself, kind of thing. Esther Perel says there are people raised for loyalty and people raised for autonomy. And I was very much raised for autonomy, super hyper independent. And maybe that also comes from the kind of immigrant parent, foreign family work ethic. And so we actually sat down about 3 years into the business. And on top of that, we were also striving for what other people told us was the goal, which is, you surely want to scale and sell this business. That's the goal, right? Like, why else have you started a business if not to scale and sell it? And that advice came exclusively from men who are older than us. And so we had this idea of, okay, we're supposed to be scaling and selling this. We need to start hiring people. We need to start doing X, Y, Z. And never had we actually thought, what does that scaling look like? That then means I need to be a manager of people. That then means I need to be worried about the salaries and overheads of those people. I have to see a very clear way that this will scale and sell and what that timeline looks like. We'd never sat and considered those things. And so after about 3 or maybe 4 years, we sat down and had that conversation really for the first time. And I think it had been causing a lot of friction between us, because I was like, we have to be doing X, Y, Z. And we did exactly that. We actually wrote down, what is the number in terms of a salary annually that we would be happy with in order to live the life that we want to have, which is to be able to take several holidays a year, to be able to work from home, work from abroad. How much is that? And then when we wrote that number down, also around £100,000, we then went, okay, both of us, that's £200,000 in an agency, that's 5x in terms of how much you need to be bringing in, because a lot of that goes to production costs. We then went, okay, how many projects do we actually need? And that was the first time we'd ever looked at that. And we wrote that down and we said, okay, well, we probably need about 4 to 5 clients a year, which look like 6 to 8 projects a year, priced at different price points. So we want to have the like 100K plus project with the big brands. We want to have the like 40 to 80K projects with the mid-sized brand. And we would love to work with startups and charities, right? Like, but that has to sit within a bucket because we don't make any profit on those projects. And then of course, all of our own stuff, we have an event series, we have lots of community things that don't make us any money. But we were over-indexing on things that don't make us any money. So when we put it all down like that, we went, oh, okay, it's actually this number. And then this was all happening in, let's say, August. And we looked at what we'd actually done that year and we were like, we've already done this. And we would have spent the next 5 months of this year breaking our backs to do more. Now, the counter argument is obviously you don't know what the next year will bring. If you can get a bit more, do, of course. But I think for us, it was a real like awakening and understanding of our finances and a real kind of sense of relief and release of, okay, this is the goal. It's really clear. We know, for example, if we feel like July has come, we haven't hit that goal, we need to work harder. Yeah. But if we feel like comfortably we will hit that goal, okay, like it's going to be okay, you know? I think that was like super important moment.
So I actually don't have a sponsor and there aren't any commercial breaks in this season. Instead, I wanted to use this little pause to say how much we would love to hear from you. We want to get to know our audience better. There are lots of different ways to practice slowing down and lots of different people and stories we can hear from. So please leave a comment or a review on this episode to share your thoughts. Tools you use to slow down, someone you'd like to suggest for the show, or just your thoughts on the episode. This really helps us plan future episodes and cover things that you might be interested in. Now, back to the show.
We obviously mentioned women a lot in this conversation. Why is it that you think women disproportionately have this issue with productivity and boundaries and the things that you talk about?
Well, it's very gendered because we live in a very gendered culture. So when we think about not all men, obviously, not all women, obviously, not all people. Let me get that caveat out of the way because sometimes the internet doesn't like to exercise critical thinking. But for the most part, women still do the lion's share of domestic emotional care labour. So I remember there was a quote that was going around, I can't remember when it was, but it was something along the lines of, we expect women to parent like they don't have jobs and work like they don't have children. And in order, for us to, in the 80s, there was a big drive to get women into the workplace, particularly middle-class white women, because working-class women that came from other countries, generally speaking, had to work. They had no choice. But there was an economic downturn and they needed more women in the workplace. So they started talking about, you can have it all. And then women were like, okay, but if we're having it all, who's looking after our children? Who's maintaining the house? And they're like, you can have work-life balance. You can do both. So we were sold these myths that were not ever brought into reality. There was no policy, there was no structure, no infrastructure put in place to support women going into the workplace. And then we didn't want to be seen as weak or not as effective as men. So we started over-functioning even more because we know how to do that very well. So there are lots of invisible social contracts in place about, in order to be a successful woman, you need to be a martyr. You need to be spreading yourself thin and have this notion of balance, which does not exist. We are not butter. We cannot spread ourselves thin all over the place, which is why I encourage people to think about work-life harmony or work-life integration as opposed to the balance. So you've got all of that going on. And then the wave that I got caught up in was the girl boss culture. So me with ideas about wanting to have my own business, that sat really well with me. I used to think, for example, people who claimed about having PMS, post-menstrual whatever, that's an excuse. Unbeknown to me, I experienced that. I just learned how to punch it down so that I could continue to overfunction. So because of our gender stereotypes and the gender expectations, it's more challenging for women. Additionally, on a biological level, our hormonal cycles, our hormonal fluctuations impact who and how we are throughout the course of the month. That then changes again when we enter perimenopause and then our postmenopausal. So we've got all of these things going on. It impacts our circadian rhythm. Our circadian rhythm tends to be earlier than men's, so we need more sleep. Naturally, we tend to wake up earlier because of our biology. The way our amygdala functions, which is like our alert center for danger, is impacted by our hormonal fluctuations. So our amygdala tends to be more responsive to perceptions of danger and threats. So our ability to handle stress is different to men's. And then things that we can do to relieve stress, we're much less able to access that because of the caring responsibilities and all the other things we do outside of work. And then we've got all of these notions about what it is to be a good woman, a good mother, a good friend, a good employee. And all of those rely on us suppressing our nature as women to be able to be productive, convenient, and just toe the line. So there's a whole cocktail of things that are sociological, psychological, and biological, which is why in my book I spend a lot of time on exercises and things to help women get to know themselves intimately and to move away from shaming ourselves for what we need as human beings. I'm Gen X, and one of the things about Gen X women was about priding ourselves about not having needs. Oh, I don't need that. I can just keep getting on. I can do without, I can go without, I can be a martyr, I can sacrifice myself. That's how you were a good woman. So it became the conversations we're having about our menstrual cycles and how they impact how we work and what makes us feel safe and making sure that our relationships are aligned and congruent with who we are. Those didn't exist when I was growing up. It was about putting up with it, shutting up and being strong. And it meant that we were suppressing our nature. And I'm really grateful that my generation started the conversations and millennial women just came and took them over so that we recognize we're not little men. We cannot be productive in the same way men are. I shared a post on Instagram. I didn't even think that much about it. And it was like, stop gaslighting yourself with productivity books by men, and a carousel that was speaking to that. And so many women were like, I never thought about this. Oh my goodness, thank you very much. That's why I stopped reading these books, because that 5 a.m. business, that's all good when you don't have responsibilities. But if you are the person who is responsible for running the household, if you have got small children, invariably the mother is the person that wakes up with the children. Again, not all the time, but most of the time. I'm perimenopausal right now. There are some times of the month my sleep is really broken, so it's like having a newborn baby again. Waking up at 5 a.m. is a no-no for me. And then consistency for women, because of our hormonal fluctuations, is different. A man, like when you look at a man's testosterone levels, they're pretty much steady throughout the month. We've got our testosterone level, which varies slightly. Then we've got estrogen doing her thing, progesterone doing her thing. We've got so many things that make us different versions of ourselves throughout the month, but we're taught to put who we are when we're ovulating on a pedestal and try to aim for that version of ourselves all throughout the month. And when we're not functioning like we are Beyonce, Michelle Obama, and whoever else rolled into one, then we're failing, when that's not exactly the case, or that's not the case at all. And we are taught, because of this scarcity culture we live in, that what you're doing right now at this moment is all that matters. So if you're not being hyper productive, if you are not optimized and working at your, optimal potential at this moment in time, you're a failure. When actually, if you zoom out and look at the month, there are so many women who will say during that ovulation week, they are doing so much. It's almost like they've done a month's worth of work in 1 week. And let's zoom out, slow down, and look at the bigger picture so that we can look at ourselves as productive beings over the passage of time, not defining ourselves moment by moment.
Yeah, I mean, amen. It's so interesting. I also did a post about this around our hormonal cycles because I'd never thought about it before, because the idea of being productive and waking up driven and just doing what needs to be done every day is just what I've done. It's what I spent all of my 20s doing. There was not a day that was different to another day. I still had to complete the task,
yes.
Right? And I think capitalism and kind of masculine success ideals have knocked out of me any semblance of understanding and knowing my own body rhythm.
Yep.
On top of that, I'm millennial, and I think a common experience, at least in London, is that throughout my teens, I was encouraged to go on the pill.
Oh my
That
goodness.
was something that
The
nurses
panacea.
recommended. They said it would sort of reduce my risk of cervical cancer and various other things. And so I effectively like medicated my hormones and controlled when I didn't have a period for at least 8 years. And so I was totally out of sync with what I actually came off the pill because I was like, I don't know if I, have all these girlfriends who are like, oh, I'm in that moment where I'm just a bit sad or a bit angry or a bit this. And I was like, my emotions are the same all the time. Like, I don't actually think I know who I am because I've just suppressed this for so long. And so I was like curious about who I was. How far have we really come with this female freedom and independence thing? Because we now live in a world where it's like lean in happened, hustle culture happened, and women are striving very hard to prove constantly that they can do exactly the same thing that men can do. I have female friends in really interesting jobs that constantly have to prove themselves. A friend is a coach of a women's volleyball team, and she has to constantly show that she is just as good as male coaches. So in the sport world, in the finance world, in so many sectors, women are like proving that they can do it just as good. And we can, but it's like, are we now at some sort of tipping point where this is all creating a disservice for us, where we've shown, yes, we can do it too, but now we're like adding on top of that all of these other things of caregiving and so on. And is it a female thing where just like our brains are wired to constantly keep this to-do admin list of everything that's going on at home with our friends, with our family? Like, I just don't think my partner has the same mental load of the things that he thinks about. And a great example was I went to go and visit a friend recently who has 2 small children. And she said, when my partner is looking after the kids and he wants to make himself lunch, everything stops. Kids get put into chairs. He makes himself a sandwich. He does what he wants when he wants. And lives his life like that. She says, when it's my turn, I'm thinking about everything else. What does everybody else need? What do the kids need? Oh, looking at his clothes. Okay, I'm going to need to buy him the next size up for that thing. The dentist appointment is in a month from now. Like, how are we going to get there by car? Is the car going to be out of the shop by then? Blah, blah, blah. Like all of these just past, present, and future things. And she doesn't eat. And I think, is it because the sort of, you said the visual of the kind of the myth of the martyr mother is so strong, this be selfless, think about everybody else first. She says she's now gotten to a point where she starts her day and goes, what would my husband do?
Hallelujah. Literally, like if that needs to be your mantra, so be it. And women function like this, not because we choose to, but because we've been socialized that way. People talk about women being better at multitasking. No human being is good at multitasking. Neuroscience shows us that it's no good for our brains. Women multitask, are designed to multitask out of necessity when children are very young, because we were evolved for women to breastfeed children. We don't need to do that anymore because we have formula milk and whatever else, but we haven't evolved past, like in terms of how we function, our biology, our nervous systems, we haven't evolved much past that hunter-gatherer society we were at that time. But because we have been told that a good mother is selfless, if you then decide, I'm going to put my children in the high chairs, I'm going to leave them to it whilst I feed myself, we receive overt and covert messages that that's not being a good mum, that that's being selfish, that's not prioritising your children. Actually, making sure you're well fed and that you are nurturing your body so that you have the energy and resource you need to take care of your children is being a good mother. There's lots of research that shows that children's happiness rests on the happiness they see their mothers experience when they're growing. That doesn't mean that it's the mother's happiness above everything else. It's that you become a priority too. So if you feel entitled to be a priority as well as your child, putting them in a high chair for 15 minutes or however long they can manage is not going to make you a bad mother, and it's not going to scar them. Something I share all the time is when my daughter, like I can visualize it now, small children, they have a knack for being able to tell when you want to wake up early to do some stuff. And when I decided that I was going to start waking up early to do journaling and stuff to take care of myself, my daughter would just know. I wouldn't then say, oh, I can't journal now because she's up. She was 3 years old, still totally dependent. I would get her colouring book out and she would do her colouring whilst mummy would do her writing. I would get her a yogurt, something to have so that she wasn't hungry. And then once that was done, our morning began. If we not train, but if we bring up our children to recognise that we are human beings as well, they will treat us like human beings and there will be less need for all of that guilt. And also, we are exercising agency. We are deciding the type of people we want to be and the type of role model we want to be for our children. So all of those societal messages will mean less and less because you'll see the benefit it's having with your family. And last thing, loads of things, but when we operate in that way, rather than nagging or hinting and hoping that our partner will see that we're overwhelmed and they will just volunteer, you will be able to seek the support you need in a manner that isn't like, oh, you never help, like from a place of victim consciousness. You're able to have the conversations. In order for our house to run smoothly, these are all the things you need to do. These are the things I'm naturally good at. What are the things you're naturally good at? And then we'll divide up the rest. That you're talking about setting up your home in a way that works for everyone. Whereas what often happens is women wait and wait and wait and hope and hope and hope and hint. And then they get really frustrated and resentful that their husband or partner, so usually a male partner, isn't getting the hint, but you haven't articulated what you need. So he's just taking it for granted and repeating what he probably experienced and what you probably experienced when you were a child growing up in a household that was basically patriarchal.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well on the other side is that for a lot of men, not all men, but for a lot of men, they were raised very much with the like, oh, don't do that. Like, I'll do that. Like, our mothers would do that for the boys, right?
My husband doesn't hoover very well, so I do the hoovering.
My partner needs to be completely retaught how to do this stuff. Like, he was raised with the knowledge that, you know, things would just get done around him. And those were not things that he was asked to do.
Yeah.
And so for you to kind of wait for somebody to notice something that they've spent 40 years never having to think about, it's a huge thing. Yeah. And, you know, one more question on the hormonal cycles thing, because, you know, I think if we do lean more into our cycles and we lean more into the fluctuations of those emotions and who we really are at different parts of the month and this feeling of not being like overly resilient women all the time, my concern is when I do let my emotions show in those moments and I'm frustrated or emotional or angry or anxious, you know, the response I get from friends or partners or people will be like, oh, well, this isn't like you. Like, what's going on? Like, you're being crazy, you know? And suddenly you then have like a bigger problem of, well, people think that at this time of the month where I'm going through this phase, people think I'm nuts, you know? And so I've often just like not expressed those feelings and suppressed them instead. Because there isn't the cultural kind of wider understanding of emotions fluctuate. What I'm saying today and how I'm saying I feel about myself today isn't the kind of universal feeling of me.
Yeah, well, number one, that's their business, like really and truly, because when you get into that mindset, it's almost as if I'm holding back now because you don't approve. Something I had to accept is that I've done various things and there have been various versions of my life that have been a little bit before their time. So one of the things that we need to recognise when we're having these conversations and we're operating in these ways, that we're pioneers. We are doing things that aren't quote unquote normal, even though they are very, very normal. So we have to allow ourselves to take the risk of being misunderstood. We mustn't waste time over-explaining ourselves. However, we must tell people, and whether they accept it or not is not our problem. I recognise that around this time of the month, my emotions are much more fraught and I'm more sensitive. So I may express myself differently. I might be quieter during this time. And I'm sharing that with you because I care about you. You're involved in my life. Because what happens sometimes is we evolve and change and we don't share that with the people around us, not in a way where we're seeking permission, but to keep them informed. So what we've done is we've changed the rules the unspoken rules of our relationship, and we haven't said anything. So now that person is confused. Who is this person? They haven't been like this all the time. So it's not necessarily because they're haters, they don't want the best for you, they don't care about you. They don't understand what's going on. So we do need to... When I started my personal development journey, it was like, I'm not even sure what I'm trying to achieve here, but I can feel like I can feel changes. And people saw that. And it meant that there were some people that were very close to me that were no longer aligned. So it's not that I cut them off, it's that our relationship parameters changed and maybe they're not as close or they're not as close as they were previously. And there were some people who resonated with me in that way, so they became closer. A lot of the reason we hold back and we suppress is because we become overly concerned that this person might not like me anymore, this person might not want to be in my life. And what I say is, it is much better to experience the finite challenge of loss than to constantly manage the dull ache of abandoning yourself to be in a relationship that's no longer aligned. A lot of us don't say what we need to say, and we don't express ourselves the way we need to express ourselves because we are worried about losing relationships because of that scarcity programming. We think that if we lose that relationship, we're never, ever going to get another relationship. A lot of us have got the programming, it's better the devil you know. It's better to manage the challenges you have here rather than A, try to change them, and B, if they don't change, make a decision about whether or not you're going to be able to move forward on that. We are so concerned about what we might lose, we don't pay enough attention to what we stand to gain. Yes. So in those circumstances, it's not one of these things where you are operating in a way where you're dismissing people. It's not about that. But have the conversation with people so they can understand where you're at. And also they might want to make a choice and say, well, if that's how you're functioning, that doesn't align with me. Let people make powerful choices. Let people make powerful choices. Let people be wrong about you. We don't have to explain the inner machinations. We don't need to explain that to people in order to justify our existence, but we need to explain to people because otherwise we're changing the parameters of our relationships, and that's not fair.
I also think a big part of this is what you mentioned earlier around who we are, our ideas of success and what we want change so much over the course of our lifetimes.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people, I mean, especially in this country, have like old school friends from when they were 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, that they feel a sense of duty and responsibility to still be friends with, and that still might be a friendship group that they are a part of, and they don't know how to disentangle themselves from that. And so I think this idea of having a level of self-compassion around, I'm now in this new phase in my life, like who do I want to bring? I actually have a friend that had a great theory around wedding invitations. So they wrote between themselves, who are the people that we see having a role in our future?
Yes.
And in that future where we have children, and in that future where we live here and we do this. And if they don't fit that list, they're not coming. And so what they found is that they actually had quite a few people that were somewhat new friends, like somewhat recent friends, but they could see exactly how those people would fit into their lives, and actually inviting them to their wedding felt like the right move to make to really show that their interest and commitment in where that friendship would go. I think a big part of how all of this begins is tending and befriending our nervous systems, which people do not know, do not understand. I'm only recently understanding somatically when I feel anxiety. I used to not know what it was, and now I know exactly when it's coming on, when I can feel it, what triggers me in my body.
Yep.
What are the ways that you kind of teach and are starting points for tending and befriending your nervous system?
So in my book, there is a whole chapter dedicated to being your nervous system's best friend. First and foremost, it's by slowing down. So it's little things like our body is a sophisticated sensory system. It's constantly scanning the world for signs of danger or safety. And it is more on the lookout for signs of danger because you are going to survive by understanding where all the danger is. That's going to bring you, that is going to keep you safe or in survival. So there are things we do with our bodies that can either contribute to our feeling of safety or distance ourselves. So it's things like, if you find yourself, this was my classic, when I had a report to write, it was due in, I'd be typing like my shoulders are up, I'd be really stiff. No one's chasing me. I'm not about to be shot. So it'd be like, okay, remembering to roll my shoulders back and not be holding my hands like stiff claws when I'm typing, actually relax my body. It is, lots of people think it's all of these really complex things, but it's the things that we can do over and over again over the passage of time. So it's things like when you're at your desk, sometimes we've got loads of meetings scheduled via Zoom, very taxing on our eyes. And we think that because we're sitting still, we're not exerting ourselves. We are. We might not have that much time between meetings. It's things like kicking your shoes off, placing your feet on the ground, feeling your connection with the ground, feeling your body in the chair you're sitting on, feeling the connection between your body and your chair. For people who say, I'm numb, I often don't feel myself, you can feel your connection between your body and the chair. That automatically brings your energy and your focus into your body. That is embodied. That is somatics. You are bringing your energy back instead of it being scattered all over the place. Taking a moment, if you've got a window and you can gaze outside and look at the sky, all of those things send you signs of safety. If you don't have that, like if you don't have a window, because some offices don't, look at something that your eyes find pleasing for whatever reason and take that moment. Regulate how you're breathing. If you find, like, I'm a shallow breather because I'm often anxiously trying to do something and I have to remind myself. So it's like, breathe a little bit deeper, breathe out a little bit wider. These are micro things we could do anytime, any place, anywhere to bring that in. And it's also recognizing when is enough. Those of us that are high functioning, who like to get things done, we are always like, we pride ourselves on 110%. Number one, there is no such thing as 110%. Number two, it's not sustainable. There was some research done in positive psychology that showed that we operate at our optimal capacity at about 80% of our physical and mental capacity. So it's starting to work out, what's my 80%? What's your 80% is when you can do a good day's work, when you're satisfied with what you've done, and when you go to bed and you're not collapsing like a heap. You actually are able to go to bed in a state that is, you're feeling safe and you can rest, rather than either your brain is wired and therefore you can't sleep, or you feel so exhausted, you get into bed and before you know what's what, you've gone to sleep, but you're not getting any restoration. You're literally just sleeping for recovery. And something else I recommend, our environment has a huge impact. It's our physical environment, like the spaces we're in, and also our relational environments. Consider the people you're around that leave you feeling like your cup has been filled, and people who leave you feeling like, oh my goodness, you have drained the life out of me. It doesn't mean that we've got to, like, I'm never seeing that person again. I had somebody like that in my life, and I had to have a conversation and say, I have started to experience that it feels like our conversations are just about you trauma dumping and then you going. And it wasn't like, you just call me when you're having problems and I feel drained. I had to take responsibility. What's my role in this? Why have I made myself available for this? Why have I made myself a safe space for this person to dump on? And it was like, oh, okay, I feel safe for her. So actually, I really cherish that. But I want some of the joy that she experiences as well. I don't just want to be the problem bucket. I want to hear about the great stuff that's going on. So rather than going in with victim consciousness, I was able to say, this is the kind of relationship I want. This is what I'm available for. So that I was setting the scene for a relationship that would be supportive rather than feeling like it's just taking away from me. And I'll just add one more. PE. We need a lot of physical exercise, whether that is walking, whether that is putting on 3 songs in the morning and shocking out like nobody's watching, taking a lunch break, walking around your building, walking around your block, doing whatever it is you can, because that helps us to discharge unhealthy stress and it helps us to feel more energized.
Yeah, and we can come back to the problem with a completely new perspective, which has always been super helpful for me. Wow, I have so many other questions, but I'm running out of time. So hopefully there'll be a part 2 to this conversation.
I'd love it.
The last question that I always ask everybody, just because I think it's an interesting one, is if I had to watch one film or read one book or see one piece of art that helps me understand you better, what would it be?
Oh, goodness me. The book would probably be The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. I was obsessed as a child. And when I felt really like I was piecing myself back together, I returned to lots of things that I did as a child and I reread that book. So I really relate to Aslan. Aslan was very strong, compassionate, kind, self-sacrificing, like Aslan should have been a female lion that was just working far too much. And Aslan had a real sense of optimism and hope for what was possible in the future and uniting people. That definitely vibes with me. And then I have to reference a song. It's called Life Is What You Make It, and it's by Frighty and Colonel Something. It is a 90s dancehall song, and my mum used to manage a community centre near where we lived, and she used to organise discos for under 16s. And that was one of the songs. So it's got a lot of significance because of it reminds me of a beautiful time. It's a banger of a song. Oh my goodness. It is so joyful. And it's like, life is what you make it. So darling, my dear, try and make it. I know that you will. And it literally is that. Life is literally, notwithstanding, structural stuff, but we can impact structural stuff when we remember life is what we make it, and we can have a huge impact when we take care of ourselves, take care of each other, and come together to make change.
Wow, what a beautiful place to end. Was there a lot of electric slide going on?
No, it was way more gyrating and winding your hips, and yeah. It was much more in the hip gyrating section than the electric slide. I'm sure you could, because you can electric slide to anything.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time, Tamu.
Thank you for having me,
appreciate
Tiana.
it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in. This episode was hosted and created by me, Tiana Tambridge. It was produced by Whitney Rosenthal. Sound and video recording, mixing, editing and mastering is by Brazen Studios. Cover art designed by Natalia Ruche. Please subscribe to The Slowdown to be notified of upcoming episodes, tell a friend and leave a review, because it really helps a new podcast like this get out there into the world. And remember, we're all heading to the same destination and there is no prize for getting there early, so we might as well slow down.